Today we're going to look at the nervous tissue and the structure and function of the nervous tissue. Like we talked about last time, the individual nerve cells are what we call neurons, and those cells, those neurons, transmit nerve impulses from one body part to another. When we're looking at a neuron, the biggest part of it is the cell body. The cell body is the part of the neuron that contains the nucleus and controls all functions of that neuron. It's the spherical part of the cell. This is the part of the cell that contains the organelles. There's a cytoplasm that contains those usual organelles that we have in any other type of cell that we've studied so far. There are processes that are arm-like fibers that vary in length from very, very microscopic, very, very small, to possibly up to 7 feet in the very tallest of humans. There's 2 different types of processes, one of those being a dendrite and the other being an axon. Dendrites are the branching of the neurons that gather the information and bring it to the cell body. Those impulses, as they're traveling through the dendrite, it's think of like a domino, like if you had a set of dominoes set up and you just barely tapped the end one, the dominoes would keep falling until they got to the end of the line of dominoes. The axon, on the flip side, carries impulses away from the cell body. Okay, so when we're looking at this picture here on the left, this area here is the cell body. The center darker blue part is the nucleus. The little branching out of the cell body and we're out and gathering all of the sensory information. Okay, then this kind of tail here is the axon. Okay, it extends from the cell body, and that's how it carries those impulses away from the cell body. It carries them out to these ends here. Okay, that is still an axon. It's just kind of divided out to where it ends. An axon can be either myelinated or demyelinated, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. At the end of the axon are what we call the terminal ends. Okay, so the axon branches out at the terminal ends. All of these little kind of oval things at the end of the axon are what we call the terminal ends, and that is how the nerve impulse leaves the cell. Okay, by releasing those neurotransmitters, those chemicals. So we have the dendrites on the end that gather the sensory information, send it into the cell body where it can be interpreted in the nucleus, and then it's sent down the axon all the way till the terminal ends, where the terminal ends release those chemicals or those neurotransmitters. If we could look at a line of neurons connected, at the end, this big pink would be the end of the axon terminal. Okay, this end here that's kind of concave, that is the end of the dendrite. Okay, so at the end of the axon terminal, it's releasing all these little neurotransmitters. All these little dots, all these little specks are those neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters then are collected and gathered by the dendrites, brought into the cell body, and sent down the axon. Okay, so this area, this gap, this white area between the two pink between the axon and the dendrites is what we call the synapse, okay, or synapse. Um, and it's that space between the axon terminal and the next neuron. And that next part of that neuron is what we call the dendrite. It's found where neurons connect to one another. When we are looking at um, neurons versus nerves, again, remember neurons are individual nerve cells. They're very microscopic in shape. They cannot be seen by the naked eye. Okay. Nerves, on the other hand, are a collection of those neurons. They are macroscopic in size and they can be seen by the naked eye. We want them to be seen by the naked eye. Like in the case of a surgery, we wouldn't want that to be so small that a physician could accidentally cut it without even seeing what he was um, cutting. Okay. Um, we were going to talk about myelin sheaths, and I kind of skipped over that part, so I apologize about that. The myelin sheaths are a whitish, fatty material, okay? Myelin, Myelin, sheath, okay? And those sheaths protect and insulate those fibers, which makes that transmission rate even faster, okay? It sends those impulses even faster. An example of a homeostatic imbalance where there are not myelin sheaths anymore. The myelin sheaths are destroyed and converted into really hard sheaths. That would be multiple sclerosis. Okay, that disruption in the transmission of impulses, so those impulses don't get to where they need to go. This is an autoimmune disorder. And as you can imagine, if those impulses can't get to where they need to go, it affects their vision, it affects speech. Eventually, you are unable to control muscles, and you just slowly become more and more disabled. Okay, when we're talking about functional classification, again, we look at sensory or afferent nerves versus motor or efferent nerves. Those sensory nerves keep us informed about things that are changing within the body and outside of the body. Okay, so those dendrite endings of the sensory neurons have receptors that can sense changes in vision, changes in the environment, looking at your vision, your hearing, your equilibrium, taste, and smell. Okay, so the sensory or afferent nerves, again, take those messages from some sort of change in the environment and send it toward the brain and spinal cord. Looking at motor or efferent nerves, they're going to do the opposite. So something is some sort of impulse is processed in the brain, sent out through the efferent nerves, carrying muscles from the central nervous system to the viscera, the internal organs, and or muscles and glands. We're going to stop there for today. Next time, we will look at the central nervous system. If you have questions, if you're struggling with these notes or just understanding the concepts, please let me know so that way we can either review or I can work on some other sort of presentation. Normally, during this section, I like to draw things on the board and things like that. So that's a little bit difficult right now. But let me know if we're struggling with this and we can revisit some of this. I hope you guys are doing well.